Video lesson, the second in our negative number chapter, is all about comparing and ordering integers. And it relates to what we talked about in the first video when we were talking about the value of a number and how they are related when it comes to a positive and a negative number. And today we're going to look specifically about integers and how we can compare and order them both positive and negative. And so the first thing we need to do to talk about that is to understand what an integer is. And as far as an integer, what we're really talking about are just whole numbers that are positive, negative, or zero. So go ahead, pause the video, and write this part down, and unpause when you're ready to move on. So any whole number, including zero, is an integer. So all of our positive whole numbers that we're familiar with, 1, 7, 3,168, etc., any of those negative whole numbers, which are the same as positive whole numbers, just with the negative sign, -2, -4, etc., and 0, because 0 is actually a whole number. Even though we don't really think about it that way, it represents a complete value, which is 0. And so when we're talking about comparing and ordering integers, the two things mean slightly different things, even though they're essentially the same. And so looking at integers on a number line, we have already said that numbers to the left have a lesser value, and numbers to the right have a greater value. And as we understand that it's really a spectrum on the number line, talking about lesser values starting as far to the left as we would like, and greater values going all the way as far to the right as we would like, we can start to understand what it means to compare and order integers. So comparing integers just means determining which integer is greater than another. You don't have to write this down, and you've been doing this for a number of years now, particularly with whole numbers. And with positive whole numbers. So one of the ways that we can do that is by using a number line. For a positive number, we're very familiar with what it means to compare integers. We can sort of look at one integer and we can know which one is greater than another. We know that 8 is greater than 5. We know that 1,316 is less than 1,500. And we sort of do that by looks now. We know we can compare starting with the highest place value and moving down to the ones place value. But it changes slightly when it comes to negative integers because remember, as the digits of a negative number get larger, that means we're moving farther and farther to the left. So a larger looking negative number, if you understand what that means, a number that when it's positive would look large, the number itself becomes lesser. So go ahead and write this part down here. Pause the video, write it down, and come back when you're ready to move on. So what that means is that if you have numbers like 3 and 5, 3 is less than 5 on the positive side because the 3 is to the left of 5 on a number line. But as soon as we turn that to become negative, -3 is actually to the right of -5. Even though 5 as a positive number would be larger, -3 is actually greater than -5 in terms of value. And so as the digits of a negative number get larger, as the more and more whole number place values get used, the number itself becomes lesser. And so we can use that to compare numbers that are both positive and negative. So go ahead, pause the video, determine which integer here is greater. You're going to write it using the greater than or less than signs, whichever you prefer. Remember that the larger or the greater value always goes at the open end of the sign. That's where the greater one goes. So pause the video, put the correct sign between these two numbers to determine which is greater, and unpause when you are ready to move on. So we're familiar with the idea that 32 is less than 40 because we've been using that for years now. Well, -15 is to the left of 0 on the number line. 25 is to the right of 0 on the number line. So -15, just by virtue of the fact that it's negative, is less than 25. And now we get to the third one where we're looking at -20 and -30. We know that 30 would be greater than 20 on a positive side of the number line. But if we're looking at the number line in negatives, -20 is actually to the right of -30. So therefore, -20 is actually greater than -30. And so now that's comparing integers. Ordering integers is just doing a whole bunch of different comparisons and setting some numbers up to be ordered either from least to greatest or from greatest to least, and determining what order their values would go in if we ordered them in either one of those two ways. So again, we can use a number line to help us. If the numbers that we were looking at, for example, were -7, 10, -3, and 0, we could see -7, -3, 0, and 10, and ordering them from least to greatest would just take their order from left to right on a number line. Alternatively, what we could do is order the numbers from least to greatest in negative numbers, knowing that the larger looking negative numbers are farther to the left, so have a lesser value. Get to 0, and then order the positive numbers. So ordering is just a whole bunch of different comparisons. So go ahead, pause the video, order these integers here, and come back when you are ready to move on. So for the first one, they're all positive. We're very familiar with this. 10, 13, 15, 23, and 42 are the order from least to greatest. For the second one, we see one negative number, which is the least, -3 and 0, and then the rest are positive. So 4, 7, 11, and 23. And then finally, for the last one, we have a bunch of negative numbers. 20 would be the greatest of the positive numbers here, so it is the least of the negative numbers. It is farther to the left from 0 than any other number. And then -17, -8, -4, -3, and finally 4. So to order and compare numbers when you include negatives, we have to look back at what we talked about before, which is understanding that numbers that are on the left of the number line have a lesser value, numbers that are on the right of a number line have a greater value, and using that comparison of values to either determine which number is greater or put a series of numbers in order from least to greatest, or perhaps from greatest to least if that's what we're after.